Hi everyone, welcome to Festival Focus episode 5, the final episode in our Cheltenham Festival mini-series. Think of it like a mini preview evening. We're going to go through all 4 days, focusing on the best bets at Prestbury Park next week. I'm your host, Ben Linfoot. I'm joined by Martin Dixon, Dave Massey and Matt Brocklebank, the usual panel. And we're going to kick off on Tuesday, chronological order all the way here. And we're going to have a talking point each day. I'm going to ask the guys for what they think the back page headlines are going to be too, and we'll discuss all the bets as well. So, Martin, day 1, champion hurdle, Unibet champion hurdle, and we weren't sure earlier in the series if she was going to be there, but it looks like Brighter Days Ahead is taking on Constitution Hill. That's the big talking point on Tuesday, and it should make for a hell of a race.
Yeah, it's fantastic that she's going there, and she's been taken out of the mares this morning as we speak, hasn't she? So we know that is absolutely concrete now. Sometimes these things are said, but then there's that element of doubt that remains. But not a bit of it with Brighter Days Ahead. She's definitely going to be taking on Constitution Hill in the champion hurdle, and this is when I, and I'm sure many others as well, really do start to get excited about the Cheltenham Festival. It's only 6 days away now. The final sort of confirmations and entries are coming through have been through for the first day of the meeting. Things start to clear up. We have a bit more of a handle on the weather conditions compared to what we've had in previous weeks when we've been playing a complete guessing game as far as that's concerned. It does look as if the festival will very likely start on good to soft ground. I think bookmakers pricing it up at 1 to 6 that the ground is good to soft on day 1. I think we'll find a few better shorties than that, but I would imagine that probably will be the conditions.
That's value bet, that, isn't it, Matt? 1 to 6, good to soft.
I think we can, again, like Martin, I think we can do better than that. But yeah, I'm glad that's to hear that's where you're sort of pitching it, Scoop. If I can do better than that, then that might sound like a success.
But let's talk champion hurdle, Matt, because Brighter Days Ahead, Constitution Hill, after it was a little bit underwhelming, the champion hurdle last year, and it feels like it needs a bit of a blockbuster clash, and we've got one.
We have, yeah. I like this sort of switch to 4 o'clock as well. It just sort of feels like we're building up to it through the day as well, a little bit as well, a bit more than that. I know that's only minor, but yeah, we're not going to get a huge field. We knew that all along. Fascinating to hear some of the sort of very latest regarding Lossiemouth. I still think there's a small chance she might run in the mares race instead. But focusing on the big 2, you get into that time where you have to hop off the fence, don't you? If you're having a bet, and for me, Constitution Hill is still the horse to beat. I think you're getting a very fair price when Brighter Days Ahead is into 7 to 4 is she now, and Constitution Hill. If you're going to get 4 to 5 on the day, I think you're looking at a really good bet there. This just seems to me like it was interesting, wasn't it, seeing how Nicky went again with the public gallop, and when we were there at the stable tour, he sort of said, "Oh, I will have a word with the O'Learys." They were desperate. I'm certain they were desperate for her to run in the mare's hurdle, so he could have a lovely little penalty kick. But this sets it up beautifully. I think not only Brighter Days Ahead, obviously King of Kingsfield comes with her. And that just is fantastic for the race, because obviously Burdett Rose sounds like he's going for the county. So you are going to get a strong gallop. She needs it. Brighter Days Ahead really does need that gallop. Who knows when she's going to pick up the running from King of Kingsfield, because he's a bit of a sticky jumper, isn't he? Might just clobber one. You don't want to get too close in behind him, I don't think. But I can't see anything but Nico de Boinville really enjoying that challenge and Constitution Hill thriving in that sort of environment. We saw it in the Supreme a few years ago where the end-to-end gallop really had the best in him. He hasn't had that scenario since. I hope it's this time.
Dave Massey, what say you on the champion hurdle?
Matt's made the right point about King of Kingsfield is going to ensure that this is a reasonable test. He can go a decent gallop for quite a while, King of Kingsfield, for all that he might be he might have a touch of the softs about him in the latter stages, which it's going to suit them both, isn't it? You're right. Matt's right with what he says. It's, she'll need it. The mare will need it. Brighter Days Ahead is going to need a good pace. But, we've seen Constitution Hill come off fast paces as well. He'll be able to travel too. It's just going to be a really interesting race for the ages now. You can see them both on the bridle turning in, can't you? Both sort of travelling well. And then who wants it the most up the hill? I think honestly, I don't think there's much between them. The more I sort of looked at it now when age she's going here, I had another look this morning. The more you look, the more you think on what they've achieved this season and this season alone, you'd probably fancy brighter days ahead to come out on top. Are we overlooking Stateman a little bit here as well, by the way? Because obviously he's got form that, ties him in closely with brighter days ahead. Forget the Christmas debacle, that wasn't him. But, he jumped well again at Leopardstown last time in the Irish Champion. Are we just overlooking him a little bit at the price, do we think? Or are we just sort of saying this is now looking a match? Do we think?
I didn't think he showed quite the same spark. I know he was kind of left on his own, obviously, and I just didn't see enough in that race to think that he's going to then suddenly pull out a performance. You go back to Constitution Hill winning, what did he beat him, 9 lengths or something? Perhaps if you're getting 8 or 9 runners, you could be really Dave Massey about it and back him each way. But for me,
I mean,
you're only going to get
to me.
Well, honest to God, 4 minutes into the podcast, I've already had one below the belt from him. No need.
I have a couple of concerns.
Yeah, go on, Martin.
No, I have a couple of concerns about Stateman. Chiefly that I don't know that he's as good this year. I don't think any of his form this season has been as impressive as him at his best over the last couple of years. And also, I'm not completely convinced that Cheltenham's the track where he produces his best form either. He made very hard work at winning it last year. I mean, it was a non-event really last year, and he was made to work hard enough for it. And the year before, obviously, Constitution Hill at his best completely outclassed him. But, he did totally annihilate him, didn't he? It was 9 lengths, but it could have been more. And so there's a couple of doubts there as to whether he's quite as good this season and whether he's quite as good at Cheltenham. And I think in this year's race, you're not going to get away with the things that he got away with in last year's race. So he wouldn't be for me. I'd be surprised if he won it.
Okay, let's
to be honest, I think Constitution Hill will win. I mean, to me, he's looked like he's still got his verve, his enthusiasm. I know he made the little bit of a mistake. Well, he did make a bad mistake at the last time out. But aside from that, at every point of both of his runs back this season, to me, he's looked the winner of those races from a very early stage, as he was entitled to. But he probably blew up at Kempton first time back after a year off the track, which is understandable in itself. Cheltenham last time was just a canter round, really. I didn't think he was made in any way to work hard or extend himself fully, and it was just another part of his preparation for this race more than anything to particularly judge him on. But he looks like he's still got it to me, and I think he'll take a world of beating.
Yeah, I tend to agree. With Matt that if you're getting, anything towards even money, Constitution Hill, because of brighter days ahead presence in the race, I think that's a pretty good bet. And he would be the back page headline for me. What about you, Dave?
Well, we were sort of saying before we came onto the podcast, we were discussing what the weather's going to be next week at Cheltenham. And for all that it's nice and warm now, the sun is out and it sort of feels like spring is here. There's a couple of the forecasts now suggesting that we might get a dusting of snow next week on Tuesday, somewhere in the afternoon.
What forecast are you looking at here?
I'm telling you honestly, not the ones in the Beano. I'm telling you honestly, I've seen a couple of the long-range forecasts that just sort of suggesting might be a bit of snow. And I said to you then, headline: if we get a bit of snow next Tuesday, and then the headline could easily be, "It may have snowed, but there are brighter days ahead." It could easily be the headline, couldn't it?
Well, You've crowbarred it in, so well done to that Norwegian forecast that you looked at this morning. Okay, let's finish off Tuesday very quickly with anyone who's got a bet for the day. I'm going to look at you, Matt. You look like you've got one for day one.
I have. I'll jump past all the kind of exciting Grade 1 stuff earlier in the day, and I'm going to leave the ultimate as well till the day before. I mean, I'm drawn to one at a big price in the Fred Winter. This is one of Gavin Cromwell's. Now, I quite like it when these Irish trainers come out and say, "Oh, God, they've been hammered by the handicapper," which he has on paper. But it also shows me that, they obviously quite fancied the horse. The horse is Robbie's Rock. This is a horse that was pretty decent on the flat, rated in the kind of high 70s. He won up to 1.75 miles on good ground. And Gavin Cromwell's sort of given him a few sort of good bits of experience. I like the fact he ran him at Galway. That's always a good race a good track, to get that kind of experience and that conditioning into a young horse. And then from there, he went to Cork, and he actually beat, as a 3-year-old, he actually beat hardened older handicappers at Cork in a handicap. Obviously, he was exploiting quite a low mark at the time, 105 in Ireland, but he was well back to do so. And then last time out, it was a listed handicap at Limerick, just after Christmas there, and he kind of raced it back to front. It was a 9-runner race. Those sort of close to the pace got away from the front, and I don't think we saw anything like the best of Robbie's Rock at all. He's a son of Massey Scoop. I did ask you to do some digging about some of the sire stats around this. Obviously, pretty new to Cheltenham runners. Am I right in thinking no runners at all, Massey?
No runners yet.
But he's obviously responsible for the favourite in this race as well, isn't he, in Stencil? But I think Robbie's Rock at 25-1 is underestimated on the back of a run last time out that didn't work out, and he's got that good ground form as well. So rain, shine or snow, I think he's covered as well in terms of ground.
Okay, can get 33-1 Robbie's Rock. Look out for him. Before we move on to day 2, has Martin or Dave got anything they want to say on day 1? Bets wise?
I suppose the only other one I want to throw in, if we're going to get better ground next week on the Tuesday, if he goes, will be Liam Swagger, also in the Fred Winter. I think he could be quite interesting. They had a dot round Southwell with him a couple of weeks ago, just to sort of keep him on the go. I think good ground is almost essential to his chance, and he's got useful platform. I think what he's done so far over hurdles is okay, but I still think there's a bit more to come from him. I think he's
frosty ground, Dave. Frosty ground, absolutely fine. Great on frost. It was very cold that night at Southwell. There was definitely some frost around that night. So.
Martin, how about you?
Yeah. Matt, was it you last week that mentioned Melina Girl for the Ultima, or was that on some other
I've spat my dummy out a little bit in that the 20 and 25-1 is gone, hasn't it? But she's interesting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've only just sort of come to the race again today after the confirmations, and I was going down it, coming up with a provisional shortlist, and it was the first time I'd paid close attention to her. But I do think she's very interesting in the Ultima. I think you had made the case last week about her, but you go back and look at how she was running in that race in December of 2023 last season off 146. She's 4 lower than that, isn't she? And it does look as if her campaign has been completely geared around the spring festivals this time. They didn't bring her back until New Year's Day, and then she's run really well at Exeter. She's got course form. She is well handicapped. I think she looked like she was going to play a big role in that race off a higher mark 15 months or so ago, and I would have her of serious interest. I think she'll get shorter again, Martin, to be honest. Am I right in thinking I hadn't realised she was sort of 20s, 25s. Yeah, I don't know if he'll ride or. Yeah, I don't know if he'll ride or he's got experience on her, obviously previously, or whether Sean Flanagan will ride, or I don't know. Gavin Sheehan rode at Exeter. I suspect that won't be the case. Coming to the Cheltenham Festival, stick with one of his home riders, won't he? But I do think she's very interesting. It was her and the short go for Henry de Bromhead was the other one that I'd sort of highlighted in my initial look at the race, who ran really well back in the autumn at this track. Possibly should have beaten his stablemate at one of the autumn meetings over this course and distance at Cheltenham. Gets in off a very light weight right at the bottom of the weights off 132. I was interested in those two for the Ultima. Shortest price of the day for Tuesday is Margeborough. Should we have a quick for and against? I'd be for him.
Yeah,
I'm against him. Margeborough. Yeah, I just think. Yeah, I would just worry a little bit about his jumping in a 2-mile championship event at Cheltenham, and I want to take him on. I think Loader Sud's a massive player on what's likely to be good to soft ground as well. I thought he really appreciated that sort of ground when he won there earlier in the season. So, how about you, Dave?
I'm with you, Steve. I was against Margeborough, I think, at the price for all that for all that it was, it looks impressive on paper. There was definitely room for him to improve his jumping, wasn't there, at Leopardstown? And if he's got any chinks in his armour, as you say, he'll get found out. You can't go to Cheltenham and make even so much as one bad mistake. That'll do for you. And to me, I think others will get him under pressure fairly early here.
Okay, let's move on to day 2. And we've spoken lots about John Bon in this series. So the talking point that I'm going to bring up is the new lion in the Turners. And can he sink the dreaded Challow hurdle stat at last? 0 from 20 Challow hurdle winners in what is now the Turners Novices hurdle. So I'll come to you, Dave, first. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he can. I like the new lion a lot. He's impressed me every time I've seen him this season, not just with what he's done, but physically as well. And I know I wasn't at the Dan Skelton Open morning, which was about 10 days ago, I think, a couple of weeks ago. But my esteemed work colleague Vicky sent me a photo and just said, "Look at him now," and he's grown again since Newbury. He's come on again. He looks an absolute. We use the word monster a lot, don't we, in racing to sort of describe horses? But he is a proper.
Is he a £1 million monster, Dave?
I don't know whether he's a £1 million monster or not. I don't know. I mean, that's open to debate, isn't it? I mean, you know.
Well, I don't know the finer details, but
we're all guessing as to when no one knows. But yeah, listen, everything he's done this season, it isn't just a case of he's a good 2.5 miler. He's a 2.5 miler with gears. I think that's going to stand him in good stead. Come the Wednesday. The more you sort of look at the race, actually, there's still quite a few in here that's in other races. It could cut up again yet, I think. Could cut up again yet, the Turners. But I've liked the new line. You say from the word go. I was lucky enough, I think, to see him Market Raising. I was there at Market Raising last year in his bumper debut, and all he's done both physically and visually in his races is impressive, and the figures back it up as well. It's not just a case of he's done it visually. Time figures back him up. The ratings back him up. The Challow gets a bad name. It throws winners up the Challow. It just doesn't throw up winners of this. It's just it's a decent race, the Challow, and this year's Challow was a good one as well because it was on better ground. Normally that Challow's on deep ground, and that wasn't the case this time around, was it, at Newbury? It was on ground that isn't going to be 1,000,000 miles away from next week, probably. So actually, he's had a break since. He'll be on ground that we know he'll be fine on. I think he wins.
Okay, Matt, it could be a very short price if Final Demand goes to the Albert Bartlett.
Well, that's the problem, yeah. That's the problem from my point of view. I suppose that's the thing. If you look at it now and you say, who are the kind of 3 most exciting, promising novices, you would say Copec de Board, you would say the New Lion, and you'd say Final Demand. And often how it works out, despite all the hype and who's going to run where, often it works out where they swerve each other and there's a race for each of them. Yeah. Perhaps that will unfold next week. We don't quite know that yet. I would love to see the New Lion take on the Mullins horse, but I do think Dave covered just about everything. I would add that he is probably the slickest novice hurdler jumper that I've seen for a long, long time. I'm really impressed with how he pops from one side to another. And that's such a huge thing. When the pressure's on coming down the hill at Cheltenham, that's going to be hugely in his favour. And you kind of look at the winners of the Challow and you sort of think soft ground. Well, this horse was a non-runner on 2 or 3 occasions because of soft ground during his bumper days. I think he could be even better if he gets on some frosty spring ground, Dave. I think he's ready to peak again.
Martin, just your thoughts on the New Lion and the Turners?
There's not much to add, really. I don't have a strong opinion on it at this stage. And the guys have covered it neatly. I mean, the quicker the ground conditions, the more obviously speed is going to come into it. And I'd imagine they are 2 horses that are going to end up down different lines. I think Final Demand will end up over 3 miles in his novice chase season in all likelihood, and the New Lion will probably. If there's a champion hurdle horse amongst the novices, it could be him. And we've seen champion hurdlers win this race and drop back in the past. Dan Skelton's alluded to the fact that he wouldn't have any concerns about dropping him back in trip, such as his pace, the New Lion. So if it does keep drying out and those are the conditions that we get, then he might just have the tools to deal with Final Demand. I was more initially in the Final Demand camp, but as it gets closer and we'll see in the forecasts, it does probably push it that other way a little bit. And the market has gone that way as well, hasn't it? I think the New Lion's favourite for it now.
Okay, Martin, we'll stick with you. You can have first dibs on the back page headlines for Wednesday. I know you're a massive John Bond fan. Are you going down that road?
It's got it. That will be the headline, won't it? And I think, I do think he's going to take a lot of stopping this year. We talked about him the other week. There are horses you can make a bit of a case for at prices each way, but realistically, on this season's form, it's very hard to pick holes in him. Really, he has his Cheltenham knockers, and whether he's as good there, we discussed that the other week again, didn't we? But ultimately, he's beaten most of the key opposition pretty comfortably already this season. He seems a more grown-up and relaxed horse, and I hope he does get the headlines anyway. Because to be fair, for the work that he's put in through his career, he very much deserves them.
Yeah, Matt, we expect to be wheeling out John Bon Jovial on the Sporting Life website again.
Yeah, I do. I think he's rock solid. Another theme for me this week is that these French horses are going to perform above market expectations, Scoop, and I think Isio Madric will go really close, hopefully win the cross-country chase, and that'll tee us up nicely heading into Thursday with Il est Francais flying the flag in the Ryanair chase. Okay,
but he's not going to steal the back page headlines from John Bon, is he? That's what I'm saying.
He might get, he'll get a Sporting Life headline, won't he? It might not be. Might not be sporting back pages. No. David Cotton, as we get headlines before.
As we get closer and closer, I do think Ballyburn. I was doing a preview night last Friday, and it was becoming clearer and clearer we're likely to be getting decent ground conditions, and my concern with him, like many people, would always have been, will he truly get home if the race is a proper slog of a race and a real stayers test because of how strong travelling he can be at times. But I think under the conditions that we're likely to have next week, I think he will just completely outclass the horses that he's in against. And of the Mullins horses, I'm not sure what price he is right now as we speak, actually. You might have it in front of you, but when I was looking last week, he was sort of 7 to 4, that sort of price, and I do think he'll just get shorter and shorter. And for me, he's up against second raters really, and he is a potential Mullins star of the future, a horse that could win Open Grade Ones, possibly will win Open Grade Ones next season. I just don't think there's anything of that calibre in the field, and the concerns about stamina are getting less and less as we look towards a dry forecast.
Okay, is anyone taking on Ballyburn, do we think? Dave?
Unlikely.
Not for me. No, I don't think so. I don't know.
No, he looked a monster last year, didn't he, at the festival? And I think people are going to cotton onto that performance again.
I think he could do similar again. I mean, he's just a much classier, he's just a better horse than Dancing City, isn't he? Dancing City could be a sort of Gold Cup, soft, heavy ground Gold Cup horse in the future to run well in that sort of race. But this is 3 miles drying ground, and I think Ballyburn's sheer ability will just shine through against, as I say, largely second raters, I think.
The only thing on my mind with him is he hasn't really improved for a fence, has he? Now, I think that's a lot because he was such a good hurdler. But often with these Cheltenham novice chases, you see improvement from hurdles to fences, and
it's early days.
We've seen that with Ballyburn. Oh, it's very early days.
Yeah.
It's just on my mind. It's just a little thing.
With Dancing City as well, he's one of them who was clearly pretty raw as a novice hurdler, and it took him quite a while as a novice hurdler to establish himself at the top table, and he is very much an old-fashioned chaser, isn't he? But yeah, the closer I'm getting to it, I'm very similar to Martin in that this is a horse with a bit of stardom about him, and he's going to take some whacking. Keep an eye on those in behind. I know Willie Mullins is going to run 3 or 4. I think we saw a few years ago with Gaillard du Manil was teed up nicely for like an Irish Grand National bid. I think we're looking at that potentially with maybe High Class Hero or Lecky Watson. So keep an eye on those for running on in the places in behind with those races in mind.
Okay, Dave Massey, have you got a bet for day 2 up your sleeve?
I I've already had a couple of small bets. I took another quick look this morning at the handicaps on the Tuesday and the Grand Annual. Good ground. There's a northern horse in there that'll suit, and he could go well after a break. Old Fringill Dyke, 50-1. He's basically a summer jumper. He's got to have good ground. He'll definitely get a run. I keep looking at him thinking, listen, he's it's probably not his thing. He's used to smaller fields. So, and the one time he did run in a big field last year, he got lost. But he was, for whatever reason, that wasn't his running. I'd put a line through that. But look, he's going to be a whopping price next week. He can travel. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that hit the frame at a big price next week. Fringill Dyke, if the ground stays on the good side.
Fringill Dyke 50s in the Grand Annual. That's what we like to see, Dave.
My sort of price, Scoop.
Martin, have you got a bet for day 2?
I'll definitely be back in Ballyburn if he's hovering around 6-4, 13-8, that sort of price. I mean, I think he might get shorter, but I just think I've already touched on it, but I also think that if you look back and look at that 2-mile run against Sergino, I suspect that time will tell that was actually a very, very good performance over a completely inadequate trip. I don't know if you noticed, but the third horse, Brookie, who was tailed off, he came out and won a handicap at Donny the other day off 130.
Yeah.
And obviously Ruber couldn't go the gallop from halfway, and he was he's obviously won a nice race since as well. So I just think they are two top notchers that were in against each other, and clearly he's not a 2-miler, is he? But I think it was probably a good run in hindsight.
Absolutely. Matt, are you just sticking with Isio Madrick?
Oh no, there's going to be a few bets on day 2.
I mean, at this stage is all I meant.
Yeah, I need to know where Touch Me Not's running. Obviously, he's left him in the Arca, which is a bit annoying, but I think if he runs him in the Grand Annual, he's going to be interesting. Classy horse. He's only a 6-year-old. Seems to be learning on the job. Good jumper, strong traveller out in front. Well, prominent ride. He's been second to Loader Sud and second to Masborough. So if his form's looking pretty rosy, he's going to be shorter than 10-12-1 for the Grand Annual. And there's another Elliott horse, which in the Coral Cup, which has to be worth a mention, is this Maxim, who just wins big handicap hurdles. He won at the DRF last year, and then he's ended the season winning at the Punchestown Festival as well. And he just looks like he's added something extra to his resume this time around, definitely, because he's won a graded race last time out form, which has worked out well just over the weekend. So it was a late form boost for Maxim. He's going to look high in the handicap. He's going to look high enough in the weights of 150 odd, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him outrun his odds from a prominent pitch as well in the Coral Cup.
Okay, let's move on to day 3. Dave Massey, I'm going to come to you for the talking point first off. And it's, will Ile Francais take to Cheltenham? Because I think we're 90% sure he's going to run in the Ryanair now. Maybe it's a higher percentage than that. And we've discussed him briefly on the podcast in previous shows, but it's a big talking point, isn't it? Given all his form, certainly from what we've seen of him in Britain at Kempton on a flat track, can he repeat that sort of form on the undulations at Cheltenham?
Yeah, I mean, when you sort of sent this question through, and I thought, well, it's we haven't any evidence to the contrary that he definitely won't go around Cheltenham. Just because it's all flat track form at the moment doesn't mean that he won't go around. Cheltenham. It's not like he's had 3 or 4 goes around the place and he's blown out every time. So I think in terms of will he handle Cheltenham or not, I think that's a very hard question to answer, and I know that's sort of sitting on the fence a bit, but I just think it is, because we haven't any evidence to the contrary. What's got to be more of a worry with Ile Francais for me is the fact that he's, over his last 4 starts, he's burst twice. That's got to be more of a worry, hasn't it, than whether he'll act at Cheltenham. Maybe the demands of Cheltenham, and what it puts on a horse. Does that make him more likely to burst a blood vessel or not? I don't know. I'm not a vet. I don't know these things. But, as a punter, you'd have to look at that and go, well, this is a horse that has had issues. I think that would be more of a worry for me, Scoop, than whether he'll act around Cheltenham's undulations at this stage anyway.
Okay, what do you think, Martin? Because he's some sight over a fence, isn't he? What we've seen at Kempton 2 years running.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any real reservations, to be honest, as to whether, you know, Dave's point is valid with regards to, you know, him having burst a couple of times, and that could be a concern. But obviously his last run was really good. They've kept him very fresh since. But in terms of the track, it wouldn't concern me hugely. Just looking at his racing style, his enthusiasm, his good jumping technique, I think it's particularly on what could be goodish ground and next week, it's kind of what you'd want, really. And obviously over the intermediate trip, he's a strong stayer, having just been run down in a King George. So no, it wouldn't concern me massively based on the evidence that we've got. Obviously, we don't have evidence of him going there, so it's difficult to say outright. But just looking at him as an individual, how he is and how he jumps and performs, I think his attributes would be more of a positive than anything at Cheltenham.
Okay, Matt, what about you? Because he could end up being a fairly short price favourite here, depending on how the week's going. If Fact to File goes to the Gold Cup, we're not quite sure yet. Is he the sort of horse you'd want to take on?
He could go off favourite even with Fact to File there. I genuinely think the regard in which he's held, I don't think we've quite got there yet. I really do think that they think this is a superstar, and you know, it's quite hard to argue against it, given when he's on song, he is absolutely electric. And as Martin said, you know, that attacking sort of dashing ride in a Ryanair chase is really exciting. You could certainly see him trading a lot shorter than what is he 3 to 172 trading in running. It'll be a question of, you know, has he got enough to come up the hill at the end of it all? Because I suspect he's going to put in a pretty impressive first circuit. Interesting again, listening to Noel George talk about, you know, they just like to think that they'd get into a nice rhythm out in front and save enough for the final burst. It's the price thing. Yeah, I do think he will get shorter. So if you're looking to play now, then I couldn't put anyone off him at 7-2. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, at bigger prices, I'm drawn to Henry de Bromhead's horse Jungle Boogie, who ran so well in the Gold Cup last year. He's 1 from 1 this season, has been kept fresh for it. I do think it's been a scratchy season for Henry de Bromhead, but I do think he's going to have a few horses run above expectations. Look, when it comes to Cheltenham, and you know, you're looking at all these Willie Mullins short price favourites, I'm always going to be drawn to Henry de Bromhead, Gavin Cromwell. That just sort of like that run down, because you're getting inflated prices potentially about a few of these, but he doesn't quite have the form yet to match up to Fact to File and Ile Francais, and I say that about an 11-year-old, but he's so lightly raced and he is very talented. I'd love to see him around Cheltenham over this trip, because what he did in the Gold Cup last year just screamed Ryanair to me. I think he'll give you a run for your money at the very least.
Dave Massey, what do you think the Thursday headlines are going to be?
Oh, no, you're asking. I think that I don't know whether it'll actually concern this race or whether we might be sort of looking at Tehupu winning getting the 3. T for 3. There you go. How about that? T for 3. Would that work for you as a headline?
You're going to have to explain it.
Well, Tehupu winning. It'd be his third, won't it? His third.
No, it'd be his second.
No, second.
It'd be his third, won't it? Second, isn't it? Yeah, sorry.
It's an easy tweet
T for
there.
2 then.
T
T
for
for 2 then. There you are. T for 2 then. There you are. That works, doesn't it? You're putting me on the spot here, Scoop. T for 2 works, doesn't it? There you go. That'll do you.
You'll go with that.
Thanks.
Martin, who's going to start on day 3?
This is difficult because I mean I've made a case for Envoy Allen bouncing back, haven't I? In last week when we were on it at a big price in the Ryanair. I feel like that could be a race that causes a little bit of an upset, but you know, like with any, you get to this stage with these races in particular, the sort of conditions races, I kind of want to be looking at the final fields and what the shape of the races are tactically and everything like that to really have a view. It's difficult where the headline would come. I could see the Ryanair potentially overshadowing the Stayers. You know, I think that could be the race that throws the biggest headlines. Anyway, put it that way. I think it'll be a more well contested Grade 1 that probably produces a higher caliber winner than the Stayers Hurdle will in a weak division.
Yeah. headlines definitely up for grabs, I think, on day 3.
They are.
Before we move on to Gold Cup Day, has anyone got any bets at this stage?
I've got probably my strongest opinion of the week in this day. Yes, I think it's this day. The new rate, the Jack Richards Novices Limited Handicap
It is
Chase
on the Thursday.
Yeah, I think we could be looking at horses higher up in the weights in this that might potentially just blow it apart. I know a lot of people will be scrambling around for the horse that's been sort of potted up best down the weights, but I love this horse called Jordan's. Terrible name, isn't it? It's Joseph O'Brien's horse. He came from France.
Yeah.
He's a 6-year-old. He came with a little bit of chase experience as well. He'd probably been jumping fences since he was, 3. He's with Joseph. He's not done a great deal wrong. He chased home his stablemate San Salvador earlier in the season. Then he beat that Monbeg Park again, form that was boosted at the weekend. Tipped up very early on. He had no chance. He unseated when he was knocked sideways in the Punchestown Grade 2, the Craddockstown, and then he's gone to Limerick over Christmas and bumped into Impere Pass. Well, he was a really lovely staying on run, 16-1 from sort of off the pace. And he gets in here. Well, his Irish mark went up to 145 on the back of that Grade 1 run, and he gets in here off 148. So in terms of those Irish horses being, clobbered by the British handicapper, he's probably got away with it a little bit in going up 3. And, I think if there's a horse that could just prove to be a cut above and really blow this handicap apart, it's Jordan's.
Like it. It's a really interesting race. It's very different to the old race, which had a 145 ceiling, and you're going to see these better class of horses competing in it, definitely. Anyone else on the Thursday before we move on?
There's just a couple of clearing up points to make. I think it's become a little bit clearer where John Joe O'Neill's might be running, because Hasting is the horse that was left in the National Hunt Chase on the Tuesday. So that and Johnny Who was taken out. So that is likely to mean Johnny Who going to the Kim Muir on the Thursday. He has duly been really well backed already, but he's a horse that went into a few notebooks, for a couple of runs earlier on in the season. So he's now been backed into favourite for the Kim Muir. Could maybe Derek O'Connor end up on him? I think JP also owns Sama Jess, doesn't he? Mullins' horse, who is second favourite at the moment for that. So it's just something to keep an eye on. Maybe when jockey bookings come through, there could be some movements in the market. That's been
confirmed today, Martin. Yeah, Derek O'Connor rides Johnny Who. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I hadn't seen that yet. Okay, so
I think that's partly. It's why it's been backed. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, he's sort of gone through the floor with his price, hasn't he? But that's something to pick up on. And Springwell Bay was taken out of the Arkle. John Joe O'Neill at Market Raising yesterday, suggesting that either the Jack Richards or the Plate will be the likeliest destination for Springwell Bay. So we're probably going to be seeing him on this day on the Thursday.
Okay, let's move on to the Friday section, Gold Cup Day, all about Galopin Des Champs. We've talked a lot about him throughout the series, particularly in episode 1, which was all about the Gold Cup, and I'm sure we'll be talking about him when we mention the back page headlines. But that isn't the talking point I've gone with, because we will get to him. The talking point, Matt, is what price does Kopek de May go off for the Martin Pipe? Now, I've set a line of over or under 5-2. So where are you going with this? Are you buying or selling? 5-2?
It's got to be. It's got to be over 5-2, surely.
That feels
well, you say that.
Short.
I mean,
okay.
To be fair, I mean, I'm just looking at the price now. He's actually currently 3-1, isn't he? I mean, a lot will depend on the week that Mullins has had, probably, and the week that favourites generally have had as well, to some extent. I think that he could be a horse that's involved because of the hype surrounding him in the build up that has undoubtedly been over the last couple of weeks. I'm quite amazed that he's 3-1 at the moment, to be honest with you. But the fact that all that hype's been there about him suggests that he could well be a horse that's involved in plenty of people's roll-ups, and it goes on to the final race of the meeting as well. So it could, although it's a handicap, it could have some liability, a bit more liability than you might expect attached to it, given, you'd expect low liabilities in the handicaps at this stage for the Cheltenham Festival. But he could be one with a little bit more going on to him by the end of the week, potentially.
That's it. If Absurd's won the county hurdle again and Galloping des Champs has won the Gold Cup and Final Demand's won the Albert Bartlett...
I'm still going to go over 5-2.
Just a serious point, Dave. You can have a horse 2 stone well in a Cheltenham handicap and get beat, can't you? I mean, I'm thinking the likes of Gaelic Warrior in the Fred Winter. He was obviously lobbed in that day and still got beat.
Well, exactly. There's so many things that can go wrong. And we've often heard of, I think in this race, it was Galopin des Champs that won this, wasn't it? And beat a gamble in the race, didn't it, at the time? What was the one that was second? The gamble.
Langerdan.
Yeah. So these things happen. These things happen in this race. You get these gambles. I think I sort of said a couple of weeks ago, quite often at this stage, we're sort of a week and a half out. And if you think you've seen one that's under the radar, you've been told one that's under the radar and that it's well in, chances are it ain't. It's on the day there's gambles on the day that suddenly appear from nowhere on horses that you wouldn't even have considered, and then you start looking at there for, actually I can see why and all that sort of stuff. Listen, it's got to go off bigger, hasn't it? I know it's the last race of the day, so a lot's going to depend on what's happened on the rest of the day. If the favourites have all gone in, it could go off very, very short. But
I would just add,
it's all. Sorry, go on, Matt.
It's got to go off. So it's got to go off bigger than 5-2, hasn't it? It's got.
You all think I've gone too low, don't you?
You're
think I've set
mad.
the line too low.
You're mad. You're a lunatic.
I'll fight in your corner, Scoop, because I'm on Sporting Life at the minute. You can read Willie Mullins' stable tour, and one of the really interesting lines about this horse, I think it was when he was talking to Fran Berry, he said something about at the start of the season. They thought he was going to be a top-notch novice chaser, but things haven't quite worked out, so they've decided to stay down the hurdling route. So if they kind of thought this was maybe going to be mixing with Madsborough and Arkle, then maybe his mark is a bit of a gift after all. But obviously you're playing at frighteningly short odds in a handicap at this age, right?
With a horse that you're completely guessing on, really.
Yeah, that's it. We will see what happens with Quebec de May and the Martin Pipe. Is he lobbed in off a mark of 136? But the back page headlines aren't going to be about him, surely. Are they, Martin? I'll let you go on the Gold Cup.
It's got to be. I've not got a headline for you. I'd be terrible at it. I was actually racking my brains trying to come up with it, and all I could think was, I'm really bad at this. I'm really, really bad at it. So I've got no idea what
the history book.
Yeah.
Well, it could be. That'd be a bit. I mean, I'd say if that's all they can come up with, it's a bit of a crap headline. But
it's a first go, Matt.
But either way, I think it will be revolving around Galopin des Champs winning his third Gold Cup. Yes, in all likelihood. Again, Banbridge. We talked in our first show about if it was good ground, and obviously at that stage we had no idea at all. I'd imagine that the Friday could end up being the softest ground of the week. Just there's a chance, looking at, I mean, it is a long range forecast, admittedly, at the moment, but there's a chance that they could get a little bit of rain maybe by the end of the week, perhaps. But if it was good to soft, good ground, Banbridge, he'd have a chance of shaking him up anyway, wouldn't he? But all things considered, we know who the horse to beat here is, and I haven't had a bet in the race yet. Providing that I don't, I hope that he goes, because I won't be backing him at 2-5. Providing that I don't, I want him to go and win.
Yeah, if Cheltenham avoids your snowstorm, Dave, then Banbridge comes into the conversation, doesn't he?
I think you've over-egged the pudding a bit there, Scoop. I mentioned light flakes. I wasn't saying we're going to be under 6 foot or anything like that on Tuesday. I think you've hung me out to dry a bit there. Yeah, listen, I still, you know what? Even on good ground, I still worry about that final. I'd still worry about that final 300 yards for Banbridge. I really would. I hope I'm wrong, because I do love the horse. I've always, it's a horse I've always enjoyed watching. If you go back to his running a novice chase round here a couple of years ago, the November meeting, when I've not seen a horse, I've not seen a novice ping round Cheltenham like he did, under pressure as well. I think Tommy's Oscar was on the front with him and giving him some base pressure, and he pinged everything. And when the way he came up at the last when he was a tied horse, I thought it was one of the best performances I've seen from a novice around Cheltenham, and he deserves a big race around here again, another one. And I just worried about that last 300 yards. It's a big concern for me, but I hope I'm wrong.
Okay, Matt, anything to add on the Gold Cup before we tackle best bets for Friday?
No, other than that, I've got a little cool on Corbett's Cross. Nothing in particular. I'll see how the market's shaping up, obviously. But I have warmed a little bit to Monty Star. I know Martin made at least half a case for a couple of weeks ago when we spoke about the Gold Cup first time around. Again, I'm interested in hearing what Henry de Brabant is saying, that he's just sort of coming to the boil. He still needed the run in the Irish Gold Cup. Obviously, he's got lengths to find. But he could just be one of them of Henry's that's ridden for a place and picks up some of the pieces. I do think this horse still has a little bit of untapped potential, and he's got a bit of in the pedigree, hasn't he? He's a half brother to Monolly, who was placed in the Gold Cup as well. So there's just enough there, I think. Monty Star, I mean, he's not a huge price, is he? That's the problem you've got, is that, you know, a horse like him with 8 lengths to find on the favourite, you know, should typically in a Gold Cup be a big chunky price, but because of the lack of real sort of depth to the race in general, then you might only get 12, 14 to 1. But if I'm going to be drawn into a race, because I do love to try and tackle a race like this when everyone thinks it's a foregone conclusion, but ultimately I also would agree with that idea.
Okay. Gallop into the history books the best we can do, I think, at this stage, but we've got a week and more to think of something better. Martin, anything on the radar, best bets wise for Friday at this stage?
Yeah, I'm pretty keen on Cargisi for the county hurdle. I think she's obviously had a very light season. She's only had the run at Ascot, which probably you can look at it and say it was disappointing to be turned over at 2 to 5, but obviously it was her first start for a long time. It was a smallish field, and she looked the best horse in the race for a long way, didn't she? And she probably was just done by the lack of a recent run as much as anything. So she went through it like she still retains all of her ability anyway. And you go back to her juvenile Hope form last season. She's won the Grade 1s at Leopardstown and Punchestown, and she's been beaten by Madgebury and Sergino in at Cheltenham and Aintree. So not every year that the juvenile hurdle crop are as strong as that, because I think we could all agree that Madgebury and Sergino are pretty extraordinary for horses coming out of the juvenile division. So she was right up amongst them. She's got a rating of 141. Fast pace will suit her, won't it? She's such a strong travelling mare. And I think, although she's got plenty of form on soft ground, she has got a lot of pace. And I wouldn't be surprised if she ended up going a shorter price than Absurd, to be honest. I think she's got a little bit more upside, being as lightly raced and as youngish what she is.
Okay, Cargisi in the county hurdle. Dave?
I think the best bet of the week runs on the Friday. If you're willing to wait for East India Dock, the more I look, the more I just think it just ticks every single box that you're looking for. And you can argue still that, you know, it might have been a better question to ask Scoot whether East India Dock goes off bigger or shorter than 6 to 4 on the day, because I could see them really coming for East India Dock with the ground going to stay on the good side as well. This horse has just been so impressive in everything that it's done. Its hurdling is slick, it's got gears, it will go on good ground. The time figures are fantastic. Everything about him, it's just bang solid. And you can argue that the 2 to 1 is still a very fair price for me. I think he's just got one to beat as far as I can see in La Lambert, and he's got more question marks against him than East India Dock has, and yet they're a very similar price. So for me, I think East India Dock is going to take an awful lot of beating, and I say he goes off 11 to 8. Scoop, how's that?
Okay, well, I'll let you set the questions next time, Dave, if you're going to get like this. But no,
I'm keen on.
I mean,
I'm keen.
The key's the
on him as
opposition,
well.
Martin, isn't it? Because the Irish, they're a bit They're a bit meh in the juvenile division.
Yeah,
aren't
they are.
Irish?
I mean,
Yeah.
Galileo Dam could run well, couldn't she? Because she's. I think she'll be suited by the staying test of a triumph on the new course. Extra little bit of trip for her, and possibly a stronger gallop. I'd imagine that it'll be quite a big field, and they should go a gallop. And she does look a stayer, and she's got some very classy flat form to her name. So she could be one at bigger prices each way. She's got the option of going to the Mares Novice as well. Galileo Dame, if she ran in that, should be very interesting as well. But I do agree with all of Dave's comments about East India Dock. I've been with him right through the winter, really, and certainly no reason to step away from him now.
Okay, well, let's wrap this up because we've still got about 6 points to play with, I think, in the From the Pot section. So just final words for the series, your best bet of the week, and we'll take it from the pot. So you can have East India Dock if you want, Dave.
Well, hang on. Whoa, hang on a minute. We said if there was points left, I was definitely having a bet in the Fox Hunters.
We've got to
we
save
not?
that final point.
Have you got one?
I would like, please, half a point each way on Angel's Breath in the Fox Hunters, please.
Okay.
He's got the festival
price?
form, hasn't he, in the book, Dave? From was it 2 years back or longer?
3 years, I think. It might be three
Yeah.
now, actually. But he has, yes, you're right. Yeah.
So Angel's Breath.
Look, where's this? He says.
Well, I was thrown because the favourite's called Angel's Dawn, and it threw me. So okay, half point each way, 33-1 Angel's
Please.
Breath.
Thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, I've mentioned Jordan's as a strong fancy.
Is Jordan's you won?
He's not messing about, is he? Jordan's is what I want. Jordan's. Let's go with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
14-1?
In the novice handicap chase, yeah, 12.
Lovely stuff. Yeah. Okay. And Martin, last word to you.
Well, I think given Matt mentioned her last week, I know she's got a little bit shorter, but I think she'll get shorter again, Melina Girl, to be honest with you. I think there's a good case for her. She's got that handicap experience at Cheltenham. She's on a good mark. I think Cromwell will start the week well anyway, and she I think we should have something on her, given that Matt mentioned her last week, and I've done the race today and thought along similar lines. We've got to get rid of the 20 points somehow, haven't we? I mean, I think Ballyburn. I think Ballyburn is going to take an awful lot of beating in the.
Have the rest on Ballyburn. That's what you're saying.
Have the rest on Ballyburn and East India Dock, maybe, or some
East India Dock. I'm with that. I can get on board with that. I can get on board with East India Dock. Chuck it all on.
Okay, so I'll just go over the selection. Willie de High, JPR1, No Ordinary Joe, Golden Ace, Corbett's Cross, Isio Madrick, Happy Go Lucky, The Wall Park, and today's Angel's Breath, Jordan's and Melina Girl. And anything left, anything at all, have the East India Dock Ballyburn double. And we'll leave it there. What are we saying?
Oh, dear.
Beautiful.
Let's have it, Scoop. Let's have it.
It sounds good. Listen, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this mini-series. I've really enjoyed chatting about the Cheltenham Festival with you all. Thank you for listening. And who knows, there might be another mini-series coming to you soon. But if not, just enjoy Cheltenham. Have a good one.